Do you want the good news?
What's that?
James Shaw's office, we'll get him on after the election.
Really?
Yep.
Nice one. Oh my gosh, that is good news.
We have around the podcasting table with us the New Zealand Green Party leader of Twitter.
Very much the stunt double. He's very much the front man.
You just like roll out of the burning building and stuff like that.
Definitely roll out of the building towards the beer tasting.
The cover art on your phone.
Yeah.
Are you showing your age here, Chloe? Twice is 2 weeks in creative endeavour, and we share the stories, insights and journeys to now of social enterprises, creatives and innovators from Wellington, New Zealand. I'm your co-host, David Binstead. Really lucky to be joined by Beck Stewart. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Kia ora.
There's a general election happening in New Zealand on 23rd of September, and we've invited each of the four major political parties to discuss and share their perspectives and policy positions related to the growing social enterprise movement.
Our first guest started a number of businesses in the fashion and art sector before she turned 20. She has said of this time that she learnt by failing, but no one could say that of her now. She then quickly went on to enter the political arena in one of the most fascinating years for her party in recent history. Hip-hop aficionado and self-proclaimed politics nerd, 2 weeks in creative endeavour, pleased to welcome New Zealand Greens candidate Chloe Swarbrick.
Righto. Thank you for having me. That's such a nice intro. I wouldn't call myself an aficionado, but I definitely love the hip-hop. I get some funny looks on the plane. Yeah?
I didn't know that about you,
Oh,
Chloe.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, no,
fantastic.
I do love my hip-hop, especially my local hip-hop. We've got a great emerging scene here.
When you were choosing campaign tunes and stuff, did you try and sneak a few in?
I don't get to make those decisions. Probably a good thing as well.
Can I correct you and say you don't make them yet? Our second guest is an East Coast Gizzy boy born and bred, although he now lives in Wellington. He graduated from Victoria University Wellington, having studied history, religious studies and politics. He has a fondness for fast food and people in uniform, which we'll ask him about later. Long-time vegetarian, past roles have included 5 years working for Greenpeace in Australia and New Zealand. He's spokesperson for just about everything. Housing, ICT, libraries and archives, tertiary education, GE, food, oceans, transport and youth. Standing as a party MP in the East Coast electorate against Minister for Social Development Anne Tolley. He's a keen scuba diver, inclusive activist and dedicated parent and husband to 2 future change makers. 2 weeks in creative endeavour, really pleased to welcome Green Party MP Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora.
I'm really curious to ask you, Gareth, just as an opener though, one of your many portfolios is ICT. So it's kind of from those early days of swapping out the hundreds of floppy disks to get a program to work. Did that kind of stick and has brought your sort of continuing interest professionally in technology?
Yeah, I guess so, because I was in that sort of... They've even invented a new generational title for it, Xennial, for that little group in the late 70s, early 80s that were young enough to see computers come into the household or the libraries or universities, but we're old that it wasn't in our pockets. We didn't grow up with it, assuming like my kids, when they were babies, would try and swipe on magazines thinking it was an iPad.
Oh my gosh, yeah, or on the TV. I've seen that, yeah.
So
it's incredible.
So I'm old enough to remember queuing up for a computer at the university, but then being open to it and wanting to embrace it and want to use it. So, yeah, look, and, as a green, we've got some environmental challenges when you try and cram thousands of tourists in Fjordland or cram thousands of cows on paddocks. You see the limits in our waterways. There's no limit to the export of software or services or IP. So that's what I'm pretty passionate about politically.
And the other really cool thing as well is that with all of the challenges that we face with climate change, it's no longer a technological problem, it is a political willpower problem. So it's a really cool space that Gareth's working in.
And then to keep it going just a bit further, those political solutions to get those solutions to the big challenges, I think technology's really going to empower, collective democratic decision making.
Kia ora.
Great pitch.
We love what we do. Seriously,
totally, I can see
Live
it.
and breathe it. I can see that. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important just to mention that the New Zealand Greens have had a pretty, I'm going to leave this really neutral, pretty exciting last couple of weeks. I did want to give you the opportunity just to talk to it or to the reset or to where you are now, just as a kind of a putting a line in the sand, and then we'll just get into some other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so our refresh, as Gareth alluded to previously on Sunday, a few days ago now, was essentially, again, just drawing that line in the sand and, saying that we have three major commitments this election. First and foremost, to cleaning up our rivers. Secondly, to serious, meaningful action on climate change. And thirdly, to ending poverty in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So that's what we're about, and we're really keen to have a conversation about that vision and those values.
And we miss Materia. She was a champion for 15 years for Māori, for women, for those in poverty. But as she says, the mission is more important than one person, and that work continues. So, look, it seems crazy and too bold and too ambitious to say we can end poverty. But this is a real choice people face this election. We could choose to end poverty in New Zealand.
We have the resource. I mean, what the hell is
Absolutely.
politics for if it's not to, face the massive challenges of our time? We've almost got less ambitious in politics over the last kind of 30 years, but let's get that back, What does New Zealand stand for? We have the opportunity to be having that discourse this election.
Thinking about, social problems like poverty, one of the things we really think about a lot in social enterprise is how to harness the learnings from the tech sector or the business sector and apply them to social problems. I guess going one by one, Chloe, what kind of learnings from the business sector do you think, in terms of frameworks or models, do you think could really be well applied in the social sector?
Well, probably at its most fundamental, it's identifying a problem or a pain point for people and coming up with a creative solution to it. And that creative solution in a business sense is one which you want you want as many people as possible to adopt, So it's just really that creative problem solving, which I think can really be applied to even the politics of the day at the moment, really.
Having that hunger for the reach that the business sector has, where you just want to keep expanding your kind of solution.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also quite, I'm a little bit wary about framing our citizens as customers, which is something which has happened. It's been quite a bizarre shift, since certain economic reforms in the 1980s. But yeah, I definitely do think that there are learnings from the business sector, particularly. There's so many intelligent people, in business and in social enterprise.
And Gareth, specifically, what about the tech sector?
Yeah, well, looking at sort of how tech solutions can change politics or society. A great local champion from Wellington's Lumio, which, going to dozens of countries around the world, dozens of languages, a great exemplar for how decisions can be made. In terms of, the wider business and social enterprise world, that's one of the highlights of my job, is that Sir Geoffrey Palmer once said being an MP is the best education you can have into your country. And it's true, because I get to meet people up and down the country that are doing well by doing good, which is such a fantastic story. And as someone who, comes from that Greenpeace sort of activist campaigner background, I was often banging on the door of Parliament trying to change decision makers. Now, as a policy maker for many years, what I'm trying to do is make sure we've got the policy and regulatory settings to empower people to go out and make that change as part of their daily business life. And it's about making sure the settings are there that people can go out and do good.
Always wearing crazy outfits, or just occasionally?
I think you're alluding to the time I dressed up as Ronald McDonald and chained myself to their Auckland factory. 8 years in Parliament, still haven't got more media than that.
I so want to be at a fancy dress party when you're there. I just kind of you must have all the outfits.
Well, I've still got the costume. Incredibly, though, it was doing the mug shots in the police station afterwards, still dressed as Ronald McDonald, getting the photographs taken. But it was incredible, because within a day, McDonald's, the biggest fast food company in the world, had gone entirely GE-free. This was about 12, 13 years ago. So it was phenomenal. I guess what I saw is the ability to make change, even just as an individual, as part of a small group, and that's why I wanted to continue that work in Parliament.
Again, creative and reach.
Yep.
One of the things we're really interested in sort of teasing out a little bit is about this, how people engage both in the digital and also in real life. Communications is really core to your work, and I was actually going to ask, how many pairs of shoes you've been getting through? Because you've been doing a lot of groundwork, knocking on doors, have you not?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, hundreds.
Hundreds of doors, yeah.
This is the best part of our campaign this year, is that we've really embraced it. We've made some big ambitious goals, the amount of doors we're going to knock and phone calls we're doing. So we maybe once used to sort of hang out and have policy conversations with people. Now we're getting in front of people's doorsteps and calling them up and talking about this positive solutions we've got.
Yeah, and that as well is a really interesting way to frame communication. I have a very limited experience of campaigning. It's been about a year now. When I first threw myself into local government campaigning last year, prior to joining the Greens, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I didn't know that door knocking and phone calling actually existed. So quite frequently, I made I made efforts to invite people into my space with regard to holding events and things. The turnout was never really that great though. And then obviously utilised social media as much as I could, particularly the medium or format of video, to reach out to people and demonstrate what I was about and what I was doing, and actually engage with them as opposed to dictate to them. The great thing about being part of the Greens and having the structure that we do and the team that we do and the whānau that we do is the ability to to have those kinds of game plans to get out into where people actually are, as opposed to trying to bring them in. And I think that proposes all kinds of really interesting opportunities for dialogue. And I'll tell you one thing, it's the greatest antidote to talkback radio.
Why is that? Because you get to see so many warm and open faces? I think it's the fact that quite frequently on mediums like talkback radio, or for lack of a better term, mainstream media, you do get certain ideologies, again for lack of a better term, that do dominate, and dissenting voices are often shot down if they're given a platform at all. Whereas if you're having those one-on-one conversations with people, obviously they open up a little bit more, especially if you're receptive and especially if you're there to listen. So that's really exciting.
Looking through history, I think the 2011 election was the Facebook election. The last one definitely much was the Twitter election. What will this one be known as? Is it going to be the meme election, or possibly the big data? Because what we've seen is overseas, money has played such a big role in accessing people and communicating with people. Obviously a big part of Donald Trump's election. So how's big data going to be changing this election?
Targeting, yeah.
We have around the podcasting table with us the New Zealand Green Party leader of Twitter. It is Gareth Hughes. Round of applause, sir.
Ooh, the Twitter king.
Chloe, do you feel a bit gutted that he's got more followers than you?
Well, I think you've got more on Facebook. You've definitely got more on Snapchat.
Yeah. He's been looking at them. He's been comparing.
Oh no, I tried Snapchat and thought I wasn't being authentic. I felt like a granddad.
Yeah, no, Snapchat's a bit of a weird platform. I've always found that I'm trying a little bit too hard on it. It's where my little sister and her friends all are, but it's not quite a natural space for me to be in. I much prefer Instagram stories, which obviously Instagram started because I couldn't buy Snapchat.
The kids can know if you're not being authentic, don't they? Yeah, they can pick it up if you're just trying to use it.
And that's why I think it's rad that Gareth is leading us on Twitter. It's spaces that we know the ins and outs of, and that are natural spaces for us to be in. So
James Shaw's Twitter stuntman.
But I mean, it's always been important to the Greens. I remember, this is going to out myself how old I am, we were the first political party to have a website in New Zealand.
That's amazing.
The first party to do AMAs on Reddit and things like that. So, because we always want to do politics differently, so we've always tried to harness new technologies. And look, I just think as a politician in the 21st century, we've got to be where the people are. In the 30s, you had to be on radio. In the 70s, you had to be on telly. 2,000 years ago, you had to be down at the market, town square, whatever. We've just got to be where the people are, and they're online.
Yeah, really fascinating actually watching. Have you seen the Helen Clark film, My Year with Helen?
No, not yet.
Yeah, I watched it at the film festival, and just all of the kind of commentary about the fact that she was the only candidate who was actually engaging people on Twitter in particular. You can tweet her any question. She's retweeted me. She's amazing.
It was the best thing in my life.
Her Snapchat's also.
I love it. She answers pub quiz questions for people.
Yes, I saw that.
Oh, Auntie.
We're going to be reaching out to Helen. She doesn't know this yet, but yeah.
Helen was actually my first live interview that I ever did on radio. I was
Really?
absolutely terrified. Yeah, no, that was me Googling her, finding out every possible contact point, and then just trying my luck. And lo and behold, got her personal phone number and got her on student radio.
I
It was
love
great.
New Zealand. Oh my
New
gosh.
Zealand's amazing.
Yeah.
Totally. Appreciating it is a working day and you've still got work to do later. Whether anybody care for a first craft beer?
Yeah, count me in.
Okay, great.
Let's do this.
Really grateful to Garage Project.
Really pretty.
I think we're going to start with Petite Small.
Well, I've got to go straight back to Parliament after this to talk on maritime transport legislation. So there's a bit of a stereotype of the drunken captain. So
Get our laughing gear around this, see what we think.
Busy, eh?
That seems kind of a straightforward thing to say, but it is more fizzy than regular beer.
It is.
I wish I could come up with this myself. It's a rustic but beguiling blend of farmhouse ale, fermented with a cocktail of, gosh, do you know French, Chloe?
Brettanomyces.
Yeah.
That's the puppy.
Wow, that's lovely.
Just give us initial impressions.
Got quite a kind of lemony smell.
Yeah. It's got an interesting look to
It
it
is.
as well.
Quite pale coloured and quite cloudy.
It's like the Lucozade of beers.
I know we're not about the volume of beers, but it's the kind of beer I think you could drink a few in a row. I'm a big fan of sours beers, so it's not that intense flavour that hits you with the sours beer, but it's got that sort of mid-range to it.
It's sort of fresh, so you feel like it's not going to weigh you down. You could.
Fresh as a good.
When do you think, apart from after running 100 metres, Chloe, as a Lucozade hit, you think you might be drinking this?
This reflecting on it even more, it reminds me of flowers. I don't know. I'd imagine that this is similar to how flowers would taste. That makes no sense, but in abstract,
it makes
in
complete
abstract,
sense.
It's floral.
Yeah, it is floral. There you go. So I can see that being drunk in a backyard.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
And
on a
amongst
nice
the flowers,
summer's day.
drinking the
Like on a
flowers.
deck.
Absolutely. Yeah, on a deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Gareth?
Oh, I love it. I mean, it's got that sense of sunshine. I want to know more about what the wild yeast is, though. What's a wild yeast compared to a tame yeast?
And is it kind of gross that it's like the wild yeast but of Marion Street? Like it's not like out in a
I've been
field
down Marion
somewhere.
Street.
Yeah, like,
it
ooh.
sounds. Yeah.
Marion Street and that particular point within it has historically had a bit of a reputation for, I think they called it colourful. That's the polite way of saying it. Or sex work on the other side of the coin.
Well, let's just say there's a mural of a sex worker literally on the corner.
So what they are doing is theming all the beers that come out of the Marion Street workshop with sex themes or sex-related themes. So,
Well, you know what petit mort is?
oi.
Yeah. Do you guys know?
No, enlighten us.
It's like the French term for an orgasm, basically. Yeah, it's little death.
Flowers.
We might have to go to the advertising ombudsman before we can decide whether we have to bleep that out or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so they're
So-
all kind of like a little bit risque.
A little bit naughty, a little bit
names.
experimental.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Beck, any impressions, and maybe round out with a final score?
It's quite sort of light and lemony. I would probably give it a good 4.5. The only
Ooh.
thing is that it does have quite a strong kind of, when you say it's fizzy, I think that's because when you use wild yeast, it's the same when you're making sourdough, you can't really control the amount that you're putting in. But I find that quite interesting. It's kind of like a kombucha or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a
So-
great comparison.
Yeah.
Gareth, how about yourself? If you had to round out with final impressions and a
Yeah,
score.
it's pretty good. Maybe not orgasmic good, but so I'd give it a 4.
I prefer darker beers, if that's a thing. I have no idea about beers, but I do like it, but I'm still not quite sure. So I'll give it a 3.5.
I'm going to go 3.5 as well, because I love that sense of experimentation that Garage Project have brought to, or maybe have popularised to the craft beer scene in New Zealand. Tiny little bit gutted that James couldn't come on, him being a local to Garage Project in Arrow Valley. But obviously we got his body double, so that's fine.
Slightly fatter, slightly shorter body double.
No.
With beard.
With beard and buck teeth.
Can you do the same stunts though? Or are you the stunt double?
Very much the stunt double. He's very much the front man.
You just like roll out of the burning building and stuff like that.
Definitely roll out of the building towards the beer tasting.
Hey, we've got 25 minutes left. There's a few things I want to rock through. If you don't mind, I'm just going to rattle through these questions that I'm asking all party representatives. Either of you going to the Social Enterprise World Forum in Christchurch at the end of September?
It's not in the diary yet.
We've got an
everything
election.
stops on September 23rd.
Yeah. No, I actually met with one of the guys
Jason
who's
Pemberton.
involved in arranging it, and that was a really great conversation. But yeah, it's mostly just seeing what happens this election.
Sure. Whatever happens with this election, are you going to just be taking a dang long holiday afterwards, or?
I don't think we get to.
No, I mean, hopefully we'll be negotiating the formation of a government and allocating, ministerial portfolios and budget bids to help out the country. So that's the plan A.
Getting on with the progressive change.
Oh God, I love the pitch. Alrighty. Do you think social enterprise is an important sector for New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some great exemplars out there, which I think we can all agree and congratulate.
And talking to Jason as well, it has, it's a huge, for lack of a better term, growth industry in New Zealand as well. It's centred around solving problems and building communities, and I think that ultimately that's probably where a lot of businesses are going to end up going, especially as we end up kind of localising a lot more in the future. And localising sounds like a scary word to some in the context of comparing it to globalisation, for example. But, that doesn't mean that we become Luddites. It means that we really take advantage of technology and the internet and otherwise, but actually have a little bit of security and stability and enjoy our communities.
And I don't know, for example, if you'd say the super fund is a social enterprise, with billions and billions of dollars in the bank. But, this week they've divested $950 million from carbon-intensive industries because of the ethical investment guidelines. They said it wasn't really because they were doing it to be ethical, it was because it made good business practice. And this is what so many, social enterprises and ethical-based businesses are finding.
Doing social enterprise business is economically both viable and sustainably and ethically the right thing to do. Which leads me really neatly on to my next question. In your own words, how would you define social enterprise?
Well, I probably spoke about it just before. It is solving a problem and building a community around the solution to that problem, and ensuring that it works well for everybody involved. It kind of, in that sense, goes against the grain of what I presume most people envision business as, which is ripping people off. So social enterprise is actually about building something, and it definitely is about building something sustainable that is welcoming.
I'll paraphrase one of our election slogans, which is it's about a richer world, a richer New Zealand. And, obviously they're in it for a profit, but also in it for the wider sense of what richness is, which is for community or for a healthier community. So it's that much more richer definition of richer.
And do you see social enterprise as distinctly different from the community and voluntary sector, or do you see them slightly or closely or directly related?
They're probably on a spectrum, right? It is different to the voluntary sector insofar as there is still there is not necessarily a need, but making money is still involved.
Yeah, and I think, that they are separate, but they have to work together, and I think many of them do try and work in conjunction. So, this week in Parliament, all the Green MPs stepped up to the challenge of Eat My Lunch, which is to buy Eat My Lunch so that, free lunch can go out to kids across the country. So,
to be fair to Eat My Lunch and the Greens and also all the other political parties, the day you announced it was the exact day they sent you the letter, though, to be fair. I mean, as a political party whose one of three main campaign goals and policies is to end poverty, do you not think you maybe could have got involved with Eat My Lunch, a social enterprise, a bit earlier?
I mean, what I would say is that they issued a challenge, we responded immediately. But look, James and I have been out there previously. We've actually been out there to make sandwiches with Eat My Lunch. So it's not like we've just discovered them out of the blue and decided to do something about it. Yeah. But importantly, remember, we've also put legislation to Parliament, which unfortunately was voted down by the smallest of margins, which would have fed every single child in the country. So look, it's both sides. And as a political party, we're showing leadership in the political solution space.
I think that's the real danger with social enterprise as a sort of silver bullet, that there's, as I alluded to before, that there's this idea that the market will solve the problem.
Yeah, but the model's not going to solve all of the problems. We need systemic solutions.
And the danger is that existing means that the onus is off the government then, which is very much so. Really, what Eat Mate Lunch should be doing is seeing themselves as organisation that's starting a conversation but not solving a problem in a way, because it is the government's role to solve that problem.
Absolutely. I think an interesting other example, perhaps, which is a much more extreme example, but is the millionaire who's building the hospital in Wellington.
Oh, right, yep.
And how obviously, it's great. It's amazing that he's doing that, but the reason that he's doing that is because the government has chronically underfunded healthcare in this country. We can't rely on the voluntary sector and the social enterprise sector to pick up that kind of slack where there are those gaping holes in the support system that is supposed to exist for our citizens.
We're really seeing the change in the media landscape because of the disruption of new technologies. A lot of journalists and media outlets around the world are going down that philanthropic, the Patreon platform to try and fund investigative journalism. In a small country of only 4.8 million people, it's probably not feasible. So what we've proposed, Novel Solutions, a public interest journalism fund to be administered by journalists to help investigative and specialist journalism. Another one is Blueskin Bay, a great social enterprise about providing cleaner, cheaper energy to the community in Waitati and Otago. What, as a politician, I'm focused on is making sure the laws and the regulations are set so they can actually thrive and actually provide those services instead of just the giant existing old power companies.
Gareth, it sounds like what you've been saying today, there's some Greens values around doing things in a different way, and around really valuing impact as well as, the business sector. How is the Greens Party going to support social enterprise?
James has been very vocal on this. He worked at the Akina Foundation doing some wonderful work there. The government's come to the party with a pretty small amount of money as to help attract other investment. It's a true...
Cynics would call it a bribe, but I know you
very
can't
small
say
bribe,
that.
though. What we'd like to do is bring the communities together and actually offer a substantial investment to help.
Would you say that they're considering a specific legal structure for social enterprise?
I think that's something we should definitely consider. Personally speaking, I know overseas we're looking at variable tax rates for low-profit social enterprises. I think that's another initiative we should consider in New Zealand.
Will the Greens consider changing the charities law to allow community organisations that are registered charities to engage in political advocacy?
Yeah, we've said publicly we would like to amend that. I think most importantly, though, what we are seeing is gag clauses for organisations that do receive government funding. I think there's sort of two sides of the ledger which we've identified the need to look at.
It's really disconcerting that we're trying to depoliticise the public space at the moment. I think that is definitely part and parcel of the decline in civic participation that we have been seeing in the past few decades. I think it's really disconcerting that we try and say that teachers or otherwise shouldn't have, political convictions. They shouldn't believe in something. They shouldn't have values. That is one track towards a very beige world.
Which, with you two involved, I don't think ever's going to happen, which I'm really happy to hear.
There's the plan, yeah.
Thoughts on data collection from community organisations and the work of the Social Investment Agency? For or against?
Well, I know Jan Logie, our spokesperson on it's been doing some great work, because what we've seen is organisations have their funding threatened if they don't hand over what is quite sensitive data to government agencies. Now, we've got big concerns, right? If you've got some sensitive information personally, you're probably going to be unlikely to hand it over, and if you know the government's automatically going to be receiving it, you're just not going to pass it over. So what it means is people aren't going to get the services they need, and it's going to cost even more in the long run. So we support the idea of using data smartly, but this seems like the opposite example, because we're not going to see people come forward.
Not invasion of privacy, especially in those spaces where perhaps vulnerable people are involved.
And if you weren't running for office or re-running for office, what sort of business would you either work or continue to build that you aren't already?
I think that I would probably be continuing down the path of academia. I would love to be a lecturer at some point, so it's a game plan after all of this madness.
You've got double degrees from Auckland in philosophy and also law, haven't you?
Yes.
So There's some interesting career paths you can take in the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just really interested in building a better society, but I also don't think that I have the monopoly on how we go about doing that, which is, if we touch later on the constitutional reform, that's why I think that no one party or individual can propose the silver bullet of how we're going to fix all of that. It very much has to be consultative and democratic.
History was my love at university. I'd love to return back to that. And last year I got to run a podcast which was interviewing with the Green MPs, past and present. So the ability with new technology that we can have a passion, maybe find a niche out there and you can actually monetize it by, say, releasing a podcast. That's something I'd love to look at.
I totally see you as a historian as well. Cool dad historian.
Yeah, total cool dad.
Got a final one of the ones I'm asking everybody. Do you think there could be or should be ways to incentivise volunteering, for example, tax breaks or otherwise?
I think there should. Finding the right model to implement, I think, is the tricky thing. I haven't seen an example around the world that really works. I mean, some businesses are doing it voluntarily, but it's again that problem of implementation. Absolutely support in principle, and I hope some smart cookie out there can come up with a great plan.
And I just also think that that's related to the conversation about work and about the nature of work as well, because volunteering is absolutely work. Care for other people is absolutely work. Parenting is work, but right now it's not really recognised as such. If all volunteers in New Zealand decided to walk off the job per se tomorrow, our economy would fall over. So volunteers right now really are the backbone of our country, and I think that they should be celebrated.
Beer number 2, if you've got time. We've got literally 12 minutes left before Gareth has to shoot off.
Before we rush.
A super quick introduction to brew number 2 from Garage Project, again from their Wild Yeasts workshop. This is called Heels to Jesus, and it is a Belgian ale. From the sacred to the profane, starts out their description. Really, really interested to see what you think of this second experimental weird brew.
This one's definitely a stronger brew than the last one. Oh,
initial impressions.
Quite a punch.
Caramel is what I'm tasting.
Also a little bit fizzy.
Now I wish I hadn't spent my 4.5 on the last one, because I like this one better. I've got a 5 because then they've got no room to improve.
This is brewed as a pure, unadulterated ale using Belgian yeasts and Kiwi hops.
Not to do a political plug, but
when I
launched our housing solution members bill last year, I worked with a brewer from the Rogue and Vagabond, and we came up with our first home brew, which was a series of beers we gave to the Parliamentary Press Gallery to help people get into their first home, and it tastes very similar to that. It's lovely.
Right, so go through that again.
We brewed a special line of beers to give to the Press Gallery called First Home Brew to promote our first home bill solutions.
I love it, and it tasted similar to this.
Do you mind me just asking very briefly about your respective sort of relationships with alcohol and sort of social drinking and such like? I'm really interested because Kiwi drinking culture
is not great.
I was going to say different, but
Okay, so it probably gets a little bit heavy here, but I have spoken pretty openly in the past few months about mental health, particularly my own experience with mental health, particularly anxiety and depression as a teenager. And having gone through quite a tumultuous period where I was abusing alcohol, and that was something which I sought professional help to work through. Not the abuse of alcohol. I wasn't addicted to alcohol, but I was abusing it as a way to escape, so as a form of escapism. And I think that's actually what a lot of people do use alcohol for, even sometimes in a casual setting. It is that reset for after work. And I don't know if anyone necessarily has a healthy relationship with alcohol, because alcohol unto itself isn't healthy as a substance. Comparing it, for example, to the likes of cannabis, it's toxicity. Cannabis has no toxicity. This, on the other hand. But subsequent to obviously experiencing that tumultuous period as a teenager, I had a few years not drinking, and now enjoy a casual drink every so often. Yeah. I would say that I drink relatively consciously, if you know what I mean. Like I think about what I'm drinking, and I try to enjoy it as well, because I do think that a lot of people drink relatively unconsciously. It's to get the buzz or whatever. Yeah.
And you're right that in our culture, problem drinking can be very much masked by the, focus that we have on that's the only way to relax or bond with anyone, that then suddenly, there's a lot of problematic stuff that happens within that and kind of doesn't really get pulled out.
As a, 35-year-old, I like the craft beer culture in Wellington and the focus on quality over quantity.
And but community around it as well, I think, too.
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing how Garage Project, give them a shout out for the show, has transformed Aro Street in particular with the bar and the brewery. But, having played rugby for many years, I remember at university, our team was sponsored by Tui. So what did we do after every game? We got a whole bunch of Tui beer and got plastered. It was a really unhealthy culture. And I reflect now as a politician how much of Parliament is actually lubricated by alcohol. Often the dinner functions all have alcohol with them. Groups of MPs that enter in the same year basically start boozing it up after 10 p.m. at night. I remember Nandor Tantros famously once said, drunk in control of the country to all the MPs, and I think there's an element of truth there too. So perhaps Parliament's a bit of a microcosm, because I think our country does have a bit of an alcohol problem.
I mean, look at Muldoon, right? Calling that old snap election.
Great input. I'm going to do some quick final scores on the second brew. If you have any final impressions, maybe start with you, Beck.
Smooth and caramelly, I go 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'd say very similar. I'd give it a 3.5. It's a really nice beer. It's just not my favourite type of beer.
Yeah, I would go for a 4. I prefer this one more than the last one, I think, because it's a little bit darker, and definitely agree with the caramel tones.
Yeah, I'm going to go 4. Really happy with the brew. I like that, what I imagine to be the wild yeast sort of bitterness and sourness that just kind of cuts through what could otherwise be a bit maybe too sweet tasting.
Can you both tell me what is a item that you cannot live without at the moment, and it has to be analog, not digital? Chloe?
For me, it would be the same item that for the past 5, 6, 7 years I haven't been able to live without, and that'd be my notebook. So I go through the same size, it's an A5 moleskin notebook, every 3 or so months. It's one which is unlined because I found that having lines meant that I couldn't do, thought bubbles and stuff. I started using it when I was in my final year of high school. And I went to the moleskin shop in Berlin at the end of 2015 and was absolutely stoked by all the different colours that they had there. So I bought a big stack of them, which I finally got through. So for Christmas, my partner Alex got me another 2. So I've got a stack of those that I've gone through, which is my thoughts and my plans, and then a stack of empty ones which I then fill.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt, but do you think moleskin is peak hipster, or do you think it's post hipster?
I don't know. I just use it.
She just uses it.
I just use it because it's uniform. By this point, I like the density of it, and I've got a little pen, which is the special pen that clips to it.
We'll get you some Misprint Company social enterprise handmade notebooks out of
awesome.
Upcycled paper.
Upcycled paper. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say we've got so much in common, but we're so different, Chloe, because I'm the same. I've got a book that I carry around with me religiously. I record everything. My kids draw in there. We do homework in there when we're out at meetings. But mine's like one of those 1B4 red books.
Oh, classic.
I'm just a provincial boy. I'm not
simple man.
Cool. Yeah. But I guess what I'd say, because I'm a dad, and every time my kids are starving and want food, they're constantly, all I give them is apples, because they're hungry all day long. So we've got an apple corer, and man, it's just so easy. You core an apple, chuck the apple at the kid, and they're happy for another 5 minutes.
Just rounding out, there's an election in 37, whatever number of days it is, which you're only too aware of. And you do know what day of the week it is, right?
Saturday.
It's a Saturday.
Yeah. September 23rd.
So
exactly
polling
5.5
from
weeks.
11 September. Yep. Polls open, so people can make sure they vote before, and then they can lie in and sleep in on Saturday.
You can enrol and vote at the same time.
Nice. You kind of half answer my question, which is a message for undecided voters. It doesn't have to be party political, but it certainly can be. If you can knock it into 20 seconds, just give us the pitch.
Well, I'd just say this election's going to be incredibly close. Every single vote's going to matter. So if you want to change the way society is run, your vote is going to count. All the information's online to find out about policies, but vote with your heart and just make sure you can vote. It's easy as you just pop into one of those advanced polling booths. You don't have to be enrolled before election day. Just go do it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this election, as probably all elections are, this election is about vision and values. I've been fortunate enough to travel around the country quite a lot recently, and where I am, I ask people what New Zealand stands for. And I'll get a plethora of different answers, but quite typically it's along the lines of, the suffragette movement, first give women the vote, our stance against nuclear, the anti-Springbok tour, all of those kinds of things. And I have to go, well, no, in 2017, what do we stand for? And the optimistic people will go, oh, we're clean and green, or we're an equitable society. But the fact of the matter is that's not true anymore. The facts and the statistics belie that. So I think that my advice would be think about what kind of country you want New Zealand to be. We have every opportunity to be a world leader again. So look at the values and the vision of the parties that you're interested in and compare them.
And where can we find you both online, respectively?
I've got the most, I realise this is such a rookie mistake with social media. I don't have the same handles for everything. So my Twitter is underscore Chloe Swarbrick, Swarbrick, and my Instagram is chloe.swarbrick, and then I believe that my URL for Facebook is Chloe NZGreens.
Beautiful.
And I somehow made the mistake, so I'm just at Gareth MP everywhere.
Thank you so much for coming in, both of you.
It's been rad. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Gareth Hughes.
Got it.
And Chloe Swarbrick.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, that's been super awesome. Have a fun campaign. Crikey, woo. I don't envy you at all.
Yeah, I've got a countdown timer on my phone, actually.
Two Weeks in Creative Endeavour is an independent show in all senses of the word, and we just want to state for the record that we have no affiliation with any of the politicians featured. We are really grateful to them for giving valuable time to help share their views in the digital. TWICE, an acronym for 2 Weeks in Creative Endeavour, strives to capture and share good news stories and insights from social enterprises, creatives and innovators from New Zealand. We're up to 50 fortnightly episodes, which reach listeners across New Zealand and overseas. To make that time-consuming and rewarding effort sustainable, we're stoked to receive episode sponsorship from BizDojo. BizDojo are creating and facilitating communities of talented, interesting and clever humans, pursuing their passions through a network of co-work venues across New Zealand. With flexible options for small and large teams and monthly contract-free plans starting from $399 New Zealand dollars. Ride with purpose over to bizdojo.com and at BizDojo on Twitter and Instagram to find out more. Grateful thanks to BizDojo for their ongoing support of this show. I want to take a short break to thank Kaleido Wellington for sponsoring this episode. Their support helps David sustainably continue to publish fortnightly, or even more regular episodes, for your listening pleasure. Kaleido Wellington is a monthly program of events where you can seek out some of the smartest people on the planet, learn something new, and access world-class intelligence. Its purpose is connecting thought leaders, emerging entrepreneurs and inspirational experts to support the growth of the greatest little city on earth, Wellington, New Zealand. For all the deets, go to kaleidowellington.com. That's spelled Kaleida, WGTN.com. A grateful thanks to Kaleido Wellington and Wellington City Council for their support of this show.
Yay, another one in the bag.
Oh, good one. I feel like that'll be really easy to edit because the only thing is that often we were kind of talking over each other. I felt that was probably going to be quite difficult to pull out, but
and it is a bit shorter than usual, so
yeah. So hopefully it doesn't take you 100 years.
Half a day, spend it instead of a day. Thanks again, Beck. Superb.
No worries.
What are you doing Friday afternoon? It's not a date request.
Awkward. Well, it is kind of a day because I'm here with you again.
I hope you enjoyed this episode from a sub-series of 4 featuring New Zealand politicians in the run-up to the election on 23rd of September. Thanks for giving attention and time. I hope you've gained social enterprise perspective from the party reps and learned something about them too. TWICE, also known as 2 Weeks in Creative Endeavour, is an independent love not money show delivering insightful and entertaining stories and journeys to now of social enterprises, creatives and innovators making a positive dent on society. We record from Craft Beer Capital, Wellington, New Zealand. which is why we usually taste and rate choice brews in episodes. Find us on the Apple Podcasts or Overcast apps for iPhone and Pocket Cast app on Android. Search for the show using the word twice, aka 2 weeks in creative endeavour. See our cheeky red and white diagonal logo staring at you in the search results and hit subscribe to receive latest episodes. Also, check out our back catalogue of more than 50 shows published in the last 2 years. Send affection or criticism our way on Twitter and Instagram at Twice Podcast. Share us with your friends and colleagues and consider rating us on iTunes. Our normal shows are a tightly edited 60 minutes long. The stuff that didn't make the episode cut usually goes here, beyond the clutches of time-starved listeners. It's a smorgasbord of pre-show, outtakes and stuff that you might enjoy. Cheers. Let's do some pre-show.
Get into it.
Yeah. Mountains or beaches, Chloe?
Oh wow, I'd say probably mountains. I'm a big fan of the Maunga. There's a lot of them in Auckland, so yeah, enjoy walking up the mountains all over Auckland.
Volcanoes, basically.
Yeah, volcanoes, yeah. Mount Eden,
Volcanoes
Maunga
only.
Keke, One Tree Hill, yeah.
Yeah. How about for you, Gareth?
Oh, I'm definitely a beach boy. We camped at the same beach every summer for the first 18 years of my life. So yeah, my favourite beach in the world is a little place called Puaba Beach, just north of Gisborne. Pretty fantastic.
Would you rather have a dog with a cat's personality or a cat with a dog's personality?
Well, that's pretty easy, right? I'd love to have a cat with a dog's personality. That way you
Okay.
get to stroke it, but it will still treat you with respect and won't just demand food from you.
Yeah,
fine.
I mean, for me, I really want a sausage dog at the moment, and I've wanted a sausage dog for about a year now, and my partner Alex doesn't want a dog because he would end up being the one looking after it for the most part, because I don't find myself at home very much right now with campaigning and all the rest. So I would actually like a sausage dog with a cat's personality, so I didn't have to look after it all too much. I think that'd be a nice compromise.
Imagine a sausage dog fending for itself out in the wild, like catching birds and stuff.
Just a very little one to put in your
Incredible.
handbag.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great. Could bring that to Parliament. Is it? You
Well,
allowed to
you
bring
could be a
kids to
pioneer.
Parliament?
You could change the rules.
Yeah. Some people bring their children to Parliament. Yeah.
This is a pre-show question, not a grown-up question, okay? If you could change any one thing about education, what would it be, Chloe?
I've got a pretty serious response to that, to be honest. I mean, for me, it's civics education. One of my major drivers for getting involved in politics is a dearth of engagement in politics and the political sphere, which I think is really crucial to our development as a society. So I think civics education is crucial, and that's probably too serious of an answer. But
No, that's fine.
and then on the other hand, actually, I'd like to see more creativity taught in schools, so kind of design thinking skill sets.
And Gareth?
Ooh, quite simply, pay the teachers more. I'd love to go down that Scandinavian style model where they're really respected in society. They're actually remunerated as if they were serious professionals.
As they are,
As they actually are, yeah.
Well, that leads us quite well into our next question, which we ask all the guests, every guest. Gareth, can you tell us your first, worst and best job?
First job was, I think, at a fish and chip shop. The worst job was being a hospital.
Me too.
I think it's the typical Kiwi sort of job. Worst was definitely being a hospital cleaner. It was a bit nasty. And what was the third question?
Best.
Best. Oh, that's being a member of parliament.
Nice one. Chloe?
For me, my first job, I was delivering the local newspaper in around Onehunga in Auckland. The worst, I won't name where it was, but it was
Any clues?
in retail. In retail, that wasn't very fun. A lot of customers getting angry at me as a customer service rep when the service provided wasn't great. And then best job, I mean, I love campaigning at the moment. I don't know if that really counts as a job. It's kind of volunteer. So it'd probably have to be working at our little donut shop and art gallery up in Auckland, Ollie, which I had my last week of working full-time there last week.
And how's it going?
Oh yeah, no, I love it. I love it. It's it's tiny little space, 32 square meters, but the whole purpose of it is to provide a platform for young local artists that they wouldn't get elsewhere. It's quite interesting. I was just had a little meeting with the Wellington Mayor, Justin Lester, and was talking to him about the differences in opportunity with young people, particularly young creative people in Auckland and in Wellington. In Wellington, there are actually quite a lot of spaces that are vacant that you can hire on short term for decent rent. In Auckland, it's not quite the case. There's a lot of people sitting on property because speculating capital gains are going through the roof. So that was what we tried to do with Ollie. There's quite an interesting comparative there, or parallel, with what's happening in Auckland at the moment with all of the development with the CRL, the City Rail Link, which will double the capacity of our trains. That's a 3-year project, I'm pretty sure, where there's major disruption all around the streets. And I thought that would have provided a perfect opportunity for council to go, here's a really awesome opportunity to just hand this over to students or local creative groups and do some placemaking or whatever. But that hasn't happened, so instead there's just lots of traffic being funneled around different back streets.
Missed opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to see more of that creativity brought to Tamaki Makaurau, because right now it seems like Wellington has a bit of a monopoly on it.
Not kidding. Hey, I'm really curious to ask, this is still pre-show because we're just about to crack open our first beer. Touched on voluntary role, campaigning. You're not being paid, you're not employed as an MP. How are you making those ends meet?
Yeah, savings. Yeah, I mean, politics is quite a privileged game at the moment, and that's, what we've set about to try and change with kind of the transformational politics that I believe the Greens stand for. But to be a candidate, you have to have the privilege of, at the very least, some kind of resource in terms of savings or a very well-paid job, time as well. And then I also think that there's a parallel there to engaging in the democratic sphere at the moment. For the most part, most people will only vote every 3 years, and that in and of itself, you need time to go through all the policies of all the different parties, and then thinking about doing something like a petition or a protest or, submitting to select committee is a whole nother thing.
We're going to get on to a little bit later, if we have time, constitutional reform, because I know it's a bit of a pet subject of yours.
Oh, yeah. There's some amazing conscious rap at the moment now, though. I mean, I love art because I think everything is political, but art is a brilliant medium to communicate politics as well. So I love the lyricism and poetry and rap and hip hop. So recently I've been listening a lot to Sweat It, which is their name stands for See What I Did There. They're a local group out of actually Onehunga in Maungakiekie, my electorate, and I went to school with a few of them growing up, and my friend Bryson, who I organised his very first art show outside of school and outside of university. He now does all of their illustration and art for all of their kind of albums. Albums are still a thing, yes.
You say albums, not CDs. You can't say CDs,
not CDs
anymore.
Yeah, the cover art on your phone.
Yeah. Are you showing your age here, Chloe?
I did buy CDs. CDs were a thing when I was growing up. Yeah, so were floppy disks.
Really?
Yeah.
Even
they were being phased out. Yeah,
you've seen one of those, so you know what the little save icon stands for.
I know what they are. Yeah. Unlike my little brother who's 10, wouldn't have the faintest idea.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than Chloe, so I remember you had to have a multiple order of them. You'd put them in a specific order to get the program to run. You'd need 6 or 10 floppy disks to make the program run. I'm thinking back on the old Commodore 64 days.
Back in the old days. Yeah, I'm not sure about the monetising, but I think you need to talk to Dave, give him some advice. He hasn't quite managed that yet. Would you consider being a co-host on the Twice podcast?
Yeah, sure. Is that the proposition?
Tell me about the monetisation strategy.
We've got really awesome craft beer, I can tell you.
I miss radio in a big way, eh?
Yeah.
You? What do you miss about it?
Was I on radio? Yeah, I was on radio. Yeah, I was on radio for 4 years. I really miss it, and especially the culture and community around radio, especially something like independent radio like BFM up in Auckland.
I was a DJ on a Gisborne radio station called Rev FM, which no longer exists, but must be something about radio and politics, eh?
Yeah.
Storytelling. Yeah, and community.
I was thinking about the Green Party MPs and our candidates as well, and I think that there's definitely a few interesting traits and characteristics that are apparent in all of us, one being introvert is probably the wrong term for it, but it is very much like this.
Really?
It's just this caring kind of nature where, I don't know, we won't always be going for attention or whatever, but we're just really keen to. We've got a strong sense of empathy, I think, that unites all of our candidates and MPs.
Look, as an extrovert, that is just extremely radio's a great medium for empathy, people with empathy.